In the middle of the church's financial meeting, the janitor Eduardo raised his trembling hand and said, "Pastor, my paycheck hasn't come through again. My daughter is sick, and I don't even have money for her medicine." The pastor looked away, took a deep breath, and replied coldly, "We'll take care of that soon, Eduardo. Have faith." But Eduardo didn't know that the pastor had already discovered the truth. His own nephew, the church treasurer, had been embezzling the employees' salaries for months, and instead of reporting him, the pastor chose to protect him. Weeks later, things got so bad that Eduardo had to make a desperate decision. What he did changed everything forever. Comment: is this family protection or complicity in a crime? My name is Eduardo. I'm 52 years old, and I've been working as a janitor at Monte Sinai Church for almost 10 years. I've always been a simple, humble man, never asking for anything beyond what was rightfully mine. I wake up every day at 5 in the morning, sweep the hall, clean the bathrooms, tend the front garden. I do everything with my heart. I love that place. For me, taking care of God's house has always been a way of serving, of thanking Him for the blessings I've received in life, even if they've been few. My wife, Celia, works as a cleaning assistant at a municipal hospital. She leaves home at 6 in the morning and returns at 7 in the evening, exhausted. We have a daughter, Laura, who is 12 years old. She is everything to me, smart, studious. She dreams of becoming a doctor. I look at her and think, this girl will have the life I never had. I didn't finish school, but she will. I promised myself that. Our salary was never much, but it was always enough. We paid the rent, the bills, bought the basics. Nothing left over, but nothing missing either. I always received my pay on time, every 10th of the month. I'd open the bank app, see the money there, and breathe a sigh of relief. But in March of this year, something changed. The 10th came and nothing. I went to the ATM, swiped my card, nothing. I thought, it must be a bank delay. I waited another day, nothing. 2 days, nothing. On the 3rd day, I went to the church office. I knocked on the door of the room where the treasurer, Fabio, worked. He was the pastor's nephew, a man of about 30, always very serious, dressed in a suit, with that air of someone too important to talk to people like me. When I entered, he didn't even lift his eyes from the computer. "Hi, Fabio. Sorry to bother you, but my paycheck hasn't come through yet. It's already the 13th. Is there some problem?" He kept typing as if I weren't there. Fabio: "Ah, Eduardo. It must be some system error. I'll check and let you know." "But when? I need to pay the rent tomorrow." I said I'll check. I left with a tightness in my chest. This wasn't normal. In 10 years it had never happened. I went back home not knowing what to say to Celia. When I arrived, she was in the kitchen making dinner. She looked at me and knew instantly. "It didn't come, did it?" I shook my head. She sighed deeply but didn't say anything. She just turned back to the stove and kept stirring the pot. I knew she was mentally calculating what we were going to do. We had 80 reais in the account. The rent was 650. She put her hand to her forehead and closed her eyes. "We'll find a way, Eduardo. God will provide." But I wasn't so confident. 3 more days passed. Nothing. I went back to Fabio. This time he wasn't even in the room. The secretary, Mrs. Miriam, said he'd left early. I asked her to tell him I needed to speak with him. She wrote it down on a post-it and stuck it on his desk. I looked at that little yellow piece of paper and felt a mute rage rising in my chest. Did my problem fit on a post-it? The next day, when I arrived for work, Pastor Renato called me into the hallway. "Eduardo, I need to talk to you." My heart raced. I thought, thank God he's going to solve this. We went into his office. It was a large place with a big wooden desk, shelves full of books, air conditioning on. He offered me a chair, but stayed standing, arms crossed. "Eduardo, I know your paycheck is late," Fabio told me. "Unfortunately, there was a problem with the account transfers. But don't worry, we'll straighten this out soon." "Pastor, you understand that I need this money now, right? My daughter is sick. I have bills to pay." "I understand, Eduardo, and I ask you to be patient. Sometimes God tests us, you know." I stayed silent. That sounded strange. Was God testing me? Or was the church stringing me along? Until when, Pastor? I'm not sure, but it will be resolved. I left that room with a huge weight on my back. I went home thinking about how to explain to Laura that I didn't have money to buy her medicine. She had a throat infection that wouldn't go away. She needed antibiotics. The doctor had prescribed them, but the medicine cost 45 rays. I didn't have it. That night, Celia sold her wedding ring. She didn't say anything, just went out and came back with the money. She bought the medicine and there was still a little left for bread. When I noticed the ring wasn't on her finger anymore, I felt like crying. But I didn't. Not in front of her. Things kept getting worse. My paycheck didn't come, and I began to notice it wasn't just me. Joanna, who worked in the church kitchen, also hadn't been paid. Mr. Antonio, who took care of electrical maintenance, either. We three were the only formal employees of the church, and none of us had been paid. One day after the service, I asked to speak to the pastor again. This time he seemed irritated. "Eduardo, I've already told you it's being resolved." "Pastor, it's been more than a month. I can't take it anymore. My family is in need. I understand your anguish, but you need to trust. God's work is bigger than any financial difficulty." "Pastor, with all respect, God's work won't feed my daughter." He looked at me coldly. It was the first time I felt afraid of him. "Eduardo, I suggest you be careful with what you say. Questioning leadership is questioning the authority God placed here." I felt my blood run cold. I left without saying anything else. 2 days later, I discovered the truth. I was cleaning the hallway leading to the administration office when I heard voices. I recognized Pastor Renato's and Fabio's. They were arguing. I stopped what I was doing and approached the half-open door just to listen better. I didn't intend to spy, but something inside me said, "Listen, Fabio, you promised you would return this money. It's been 3 months. Uncle, I know, but I had to use it to pay my debts. I was desperate. You stole the employees' salaries, Fabio. That's a crime." "I didn't steal, I just borrowed. I'll pay it back." "When?" "I don't know, but I will. You just need to give me some time." Silence. "Uncle, please. If you report me, I'll go to jail. My life will be over." Another silence. Longer. "All right, but you're going to promise me you'll find a way to pay it back." "I promise." I felt my legs tremble. I leaned against the wall to keep from falling. Everything made sense now. Fabio had diverted our money, and the pastor knew, and he was protecting him. I went home that day like a zombie. I couldn't process what I had heard. The man I trusted, the man who preached about honesty, justice, and love for one's neighbor, was shielding a thief, and that thief was letting my family go hungry. When I got home, Celia was crying in the kitchen. Laura was beside her, holding her hand. "What happened?" "The landlady came here today. She said if we don't pay by Friday, she's going to evict us." I felt something break inside me. I looked at Laura. She looked back at me with those big, frightened eyes. And at that moment, I made a decision. I was going to do something. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept staring at the ceiling, listening to Celia's breathing beside me. She was exhausted, but I knew she wasn't really sleeping either. We did that sometimes, pretended to be asleep so as not to worry the other. I got out of bed carefully, went to the kitchen, and sat down on the plastic chair that was already broken on one side. I put my hands on my head and tried to think. What could I do? Report the pastor? Report Fabio? But who would believe me? I was just the janitor. Nobody would listen to what I had to say. And worse, if I did that, I'd probably lose my job. And then, how would I support my family? But at the same time, how could I keep working in that place, knowing that the man who was supposed to protect me was betraying me? How could I keep sweeping that floor, cleaning those benches, caring for that house of God, knowing that God was being dishonored there? The next day, when I got to the church, I tried to act normal. I grabbed the broom and started sweeping the parking lot, but every movement felt heavy. I looked at that big, beautiful building, with its painted walls and well-kept garden, and thought, how much money passes through here? How much money comes in every Sunday in tithes and offerings? And where does that money go if not to pay the people who work here? Joanna came to talk to me during the break. Her eyes were red. She looked like she had been crying. "Eduardo, Did you get paid? No. And you? She shook her head. I can't take it anymore. My son needs controlled medication. I don't have money even to buy rice. Yesterday I ate only bread with coffee. My husband is unemployed. I'm the only one working, and the pastor keeps stringing me along. Joanna, I found out something. She looked at me, startled. What? I told her what I had heard, the conversation between the pastor and Fabio. She went pale, put her hand over her mouth. I don't believe it. I didn't want to believe it either, but that's what I heard. And what are we going to do? I don't know. We stood there, the two of us, in silence. Two poor, humiliated, robbed employees, not knowing what to do. The following Sunday, Pastor Renato went up to the pulpit and preached about honesty. He opened the Bible and read a verse about not stealing, about being upright, about walking in the light. He spoke with that firm, full of conviction voice, and people nodded, applauded, said, Amen. I was at the back of the church, leaning against the wall. I felt such a wave of revolt rising inside me that I had to leave. I went to the bathroom, locked the door, and took a deep breath. I looked in the mirror. My face was tired, aged. I looked 10 years older. God, what do? I whispered, looking up. Give me an answer, please. No answer came, only silence. I went back home and found Laura sitting in the living room doing her homework. She looked at me and smiled. Hi, Dad. Everything okay? Everything's fine, sweetie. Ma, Dad, the teacher said that next week we have to bring money for a field trip. It's 30 reais. We're going to visit a museum. I felt my heart tighten. Okay, sweetie, we'll work it out. She smiled and went back to her notebook. I went to the bedroom, lay on the bed and covered my face with my hands. 30 reais. I didn't have 30 reais. I had nothing. Celia came into the room and sat on the edge of the bed. Eduardo, we need to talk. About what? About the situation. We can't go on like this. I know. So what are you going to do? I don't know, Celia. I really don't know. She was silent for a while. Then she said, You need to confront the pastor. You need to talk to him again. And this time, you can't accept a vague answer. You need to demand your money. And if he fires me? And if he does? We're already going hungry anyway. At least you'll walk away with your dignity. She was right. I needed to do something. The next day, I knocked on the pastor's office door. He was on the phone but motioned for me to come in. I stood there waiting for him to finish the call. When he hung up, he looked at me impatiently. What is it, Eduardo? Pastor, I need to speak seriously with you. About what? About my paycheck. It's been 2 months. I can't take it anymore. My family is in need. I need this money now. He sighed and leaned back in the chair. Eduardo, I've already explained. We're going through a financial difficulty, but it will be resolved. Pastor, I heard your conversation with Fabio. He froze, looked straight at me. What did you hear? I heard that he diverted our salaries and that you're covering for him. The silence that followed was heavy. The pastor got up from his chair, came around the desk and stood in front of me. He was serious, but you could see the nervousness in his eyes. Eduardo, you didn't understand what you heard. I understood perfectly, Pastor. Fabio made a mistake, yes, but he's young. He was desperate. He's going to pay the money back. And in the meantime, me, Joanna, and Mr. Antonio go without food. I'll find a way to fix this. How? I don't know yet, but I will. Pastor, with all due respect, you're protecting a thief, and you know it. He stepped forward, pointed his finger at me. Be careful what you say, Eduardo. Fabio is my nephew. He's my family. I'm not going to destroy his life over a mistake. And my life, my family's life, that doesn't matter? Of course it matters, but you need to understand this is more complicated than it looks. It's not complicated, Pastor. It's simple. He stole, and you're covering for him. The pastor took a deep breath, trying to control himself. Eduardo, I'm going to ask you one thing. Don't talk about this to anyone. This could destroy the church's reputation. It could drive the congregation away. It could end everything we've built here. And what do I get out of it? I'll pay you. I'll find a way to gather the money and pay you. But you need to give me time. How much time? 2 weeks. 2 weeks? Eduardo, please. I looked at him. I saw despair in his eyes, but it wasn't despair for me, it was despair for himself. He was afraid of being exposed, afraid of losing his position, afraid the truth would come out. All right, Pastor, 2 weeks. But if in 2 weeks I don't get paid, I'm going to report it. To the police, to the church board, to whoever it takes. He nodded, but said nothing. I left that room with a mix of anger and sadness. Anger, because I had given him one more chance. Sadness, because I knew deep down that he wasn't going to keep his promise. I went home and told Celia everything. She hugged me and said, "You did the right thing. Now we wait." But while we waited, things got worse and worse. The landlady came back. This time she brought a paper, an eviction notice. We had 7 days to vacate the property. Celia cried, Laura cried. I didn't cry. I had no tears left. That night, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I made a decision. I wasn't going to wait 2 weeks. I wasn't going to wait for anything anymore. I was going to act. I was going to bring justice, even if it cost everything. The next day, I woke up with a determination I hadn't felt in a long time. I wasn't going to wait for the pastor anymore. I wasn't going to accept empty promises anymore. I needed to do something concrete. But what? I had no proof other than what I had heard. And who would believe my word against the pastor's? That's when I remembered. The church had security cameras in the administration hallway, in the treasurer's office, in several places, and all the recordings were stored on a computer in the control room. I knew this because once, when a piece of sound equipment was stolen from the church, the pastor had asked me to help check the footage. If I could get access to those images, maybe I could prove what was happening. Maybe I could capture some conversation, some confession, something that would show I was telling the truth. But how? I didn't have permission to enter that room. Only the pastor and Fabio had the key. And even if I managed to get in, I didn't know how to use that system. It was all computerized, with passwords, codes. I talked to Joanna at lunchtime. I told her my plan. Eduardo, that's risky. If the pastor finds out, he'll fire you on the spot. So what? I'm practically fired already anyway. It's been 2 months since I got paid. What's the difference? She grew thoughtful. And how are you going to get into the room? I don't know yet, but I'll find a way. She sighed. I support you, Eduardo. If you need anything, let me know. In that afternoon, I watched the movement around the church. The pastor always left around 4 o'clock to go home for lunch. Fabio stayed longer, but he also left at times. And when they were out, the secretary, Mrs. Miriam, was alone in the office. She was a lady of about 60, kind, always treated me well. I thought, if I could distract her for a few minutes, maybe I could grab the key to the control room. But where was that key? Probably in a drawer, a cabinet somewhere in the pastor's office. The next day, at 4:30 in the afternoon, the pastor left. Fabio did too. Mrs. Miriam was sitting at reception, fiddling with her cell phone. I took a deep breath and went to her. Mrs. Miriam, could you help me with something? Of course, Eduardo. What is it? There's a faucet in the women's bathroom that's leaking. I tried to fix it, but I couldn't. Could you take a look to see if we need to call a plumber? She stood up, grabbed her purse. Let's go! As she walked ahead, my heart pounded. I had only a few minutes. I went into the pastor's office and looked around. Where would the key be? I opened the top drawer of his desk. Nothing. I opened the second. Pens, papers, a stapler. I opened the third. And there it was, a bunch of keys, all labeled. I searched quickly and found control room. I took the key, closed the drawer, and left as fast as I could. I went to the control room, which was in a side corridor, far from reception. I unlocked the door, went in, and closed it behind me. The room was small, with a desk, a computer, and several monitors showing the images from the cameras around the church. My heart was beating so hard I could hear it in my ears. I sat down, looked at the computer. There was a login screen. It required a password. I tried some obvious combinations. 1234, church, password. Nothing worked. I tried the pastor's name, Renato. Nothing. I tried the church's founding date that was written on the entry wall, 1905-1998. Nothing. I started to break into a cold sweat. I didn't have much time. Mrs. Miriam could be back any moment. I looked around, searching for a note, some paper with the password. Nothing. I opened the desk drawer. Papers, cables, batteries. And then I saw it, a post-it stuck under the keyboard. I lifted the keyboard, and there it was. Monte Sinai 2020. I typed the password. The system unlocked. I breathed with relief. Now I had access to everything. I went straight to the recordings folder. There were hundreds of files, organized by date and by camera. I looked for the date of the conversation I had heard between the pastor and Fabio. I remembered it had been on a Wednesday 2 weeks ago. I found the file. I clicked. The image appeared. It was the camera from the administration hallway. I fast-forwarded the video to the approximate time. And then I heard it. Their voices coming out of the room. You couldn't clearly see their faces, but you could hear them. Fabio, you promised you would return that money? Uncle, I know, but I had to use it to pay my debts. You stole the employees' salaries, Fabio. That's a crime. Done. I had the proof. I saved that clip to a flash drive I had brought with me. When I finished, I shut down the computer, left the room, locked the door, and hurried back to put the key in the pastor's drawer. When I reached the office, I almost ran into Mrs. Miriam. Eduardo, what are you doing here? I froze. I came to see if the pastor had left any message for me. She looked at me suspiciously. Message? What message? It's just that he said he would call me, but he didn't. I thought he might have left a note. She kept staring at me for a few more seconds. Then she said, "There's no note here, and you shouldn't be in this room without authorization. Sorry, Mrs. Miriam, it won't happen again." I left trembling, but I had done it. I had the proof. When I got home, I showed the flash drive to Celia. She put it in her laptop and watched the video. When it ended, she looked at me with wide eyes. Eduardo, this is the proof you needed. I know. And now? What are you going to do? I'm going to take this to the church board. They need to know what's happening. The following Sunday after the service, I asked to speak with the board members. There were 5 people, 3 men and 2 women, all long-time members of the church, respected by the community. They received me in a private room. Eduardo, what do you need? I took a deep breath. I need to show you something. I plugged the flash drive into the laptop on the table and played the video. Everyone stayed silent, listening to the conversation between the pastor and Fabio. When it ended, the atmosphere in the room was heavy. One of the board members, Mr. Jose, a man of about 70, looked at me. Eduardo, where did you get this? From the church's security cameras. And does the pastor know you have this? No. They looked at each other. No one said anything for a while. Then one of the women, Sister Luciana, spoke. Eduardo, this is very serious. If what's in this video is true, the pastor made a very grave mistake. It's not a mistake, sister. It's a crime. He's covering up a theft. Mr. Jose raised his hand. Calm down, Eduardo. Let's take it easy. We need to investigate this properly before making any decision. Investigate what? It's all there in the video. I understand you're outraged, but we can't just accuse the pastor without being absolutely sure of what's going on. Absolutely sure? You just heard him admit that his nephew stole our salaries. Another board member, Deacon Paolo, said, Eduardo, Pastor Renato is a man of God. He has led this church for more than 15 years. We need to give him the benefit of the doubt. I felt my blood boil. Benefit of the doubt? Meanwhile, my family and I are going hungry. Joanna is going hungry. Mr. Antonio is going hungry. And you want to give the benefit of the doubt? Sister Luciana tried to calm me. Eduardo, I understand your pain, and I promise we will resolve this, but you need to give us time. How much time? A week. A week? I don't have a week. I was evicted from my apartment. I'm living at my mother-in-law's house with my wife and daughter in a tiny room. I don't have time. Mr. Jose stood up. Eduardo, unfortunately, that's the time we have. We will call an extraordinary meeting with the pastor and Fabio and confront them with this recording. But until then, I ask that you don't talk about this with anyone. Understood? I looked at him. I looked at all of them, And I realized something that made me angry and sad at the same time. They weren't going to do anything. They were going to protect the pastor, because he was important, because he was the leader, and I was just the janitor. Understood. I left that room defeated. I went back home and told Celia everything. She hugged me and cried with me. 3 days passed. The extraordinary meeting the board had promised took place, but I wasn't invited. Neither was Joanna nor Mr. Antonio. They spoke with the pastor and Fabio behind closed doors, and the next day Mr. Jose called me in to talk. Eduardo, we spoke with Pastor Renato and with Fabio, and Fabio acknowledged his mistake. He said he was going through financial difficulties and made a bad decision, but he promised to return all the money. When? Within 3 months. Yeah, 3 months. Eduardo, he doesn't have all the money right now, but he'll pay it back in installments. The church will help him as well. I felt the anger rise in my throat. And the pastor? Will he be punished for covering it up? Mr. Jose looked away. The pastor acted wrongly, yes, but he was trying to protect his family, and we understand that. He'll receive an internal warning from the board. A warning? That's it? Eduardo, we have to think about the good of the church. If this leaks, the church's reputation will be destroyed. The congregation will leave. Offerings will fall. We'll lose everything. And what about me and Joanna and Mr. Antonio? What do we lose? You'll be paid. Fabio promised. Oh, he promised. And I'm supposed to trust the word of a thief. Eduardo, I know it's hard, but this is the best solution we could find. I left that conversation angrier than ever. It wasn't justice. It was institutional protection. They cared more about the image of the church than the people who worked in it. The following Sunday, during the service, Pastor Renato took the pulpit. He looked tired, but kept his usual firm tone. Brothers and sisters, I want to share something with you today. Recently, our church went through a time of testing. Some of our employees went unpaid due to an administrative problem, and that saddened me deeply. But I want you to know that we're resolving the situation, and I ask that you pray for us so we can overcome this challenge together. He didn't mention Fabio's name. He didn't mention the embezzlement. He didn't mention anything about what really happened. He only said, administrative problem. As if it were a system error, a technical glitch, not a theft. I looked around. People believed him. They nodded, said amen, raised their hands. No one questioned anything. No one asked, because he was the pastor, and the pastor is always right. When the service ended, I went to the church kitchen, where Joanna was washing the dishes from the breakfast they'd served before service. She looked at me with red eyes. Eduardo, I can't take this anymore. My son's been without his medication for a week. He has anxiety attacks and needs it. I don't have money to buy it, and the pastor keeps talking like everything's fine. I know, Joanna, I know. Do you think they'll really pay us? No. She started crying. She dropped the dishes, leaned on the sink and sobbed. I feel so humiliated, Eduardo. I've worked here for 8 years. I've always done everything they asked. I clean, I cook, I serve, and now they treat me like I'm nothing. I put my hand on her shoulder. You're not nothing, Joanna. You're important, and you deserve respect. But they don't respect me. I know, but we're not giving up. That same afternoon I went home and made a decision. If the church board wasn't going to do anything, I would find another way to get justice. I would go to the police. On Monday morning, I went to the nearest police station. I explained the situation to the officer on duty and showed him the recording I had on the flash drive. He listened carefully. Mr. Eduardo, this is clearly a case of embezzlement. The treasurer diverted money that belonged to the employees, and the pastor, by covering it up, becomes an accomplice. But I have to inform you this is also a labor matter. You'll need to file a lawsuit against the church. But can you investigate? I can, but the investigation might take months, and you'll need a lawyer to ensure your rights are protected. I don't have money for a lawyer. Then go to the public defender's office. They'll help you. I left the station with a police report protocol. It wasn't much, but it was something. 2 days later, I got a phone call. It was Mrs. Miriam, the church secretary. "Eduardo, the pastor wants to talk to you. Can you come now?" I went. When I entered his office, he was sitting behind the desk, his face hard. Fabio was beside him, arms crossed. "Eduardo, I heard you went to the police." I didn't answer. "Do you think that was the right thing to do?" "I think seeking justice is always the right thing to do." The pastor slammed his hand on the table. "Justice? You're destroying this church, Eduardo. Do you know what will happen if the police come here to investigate? It'll be in the news. It'll become a scandal. People will lose their faith. People should lose faith in those who steal from them." Fabio stepped forward. "I already said I'll pay the money back." "When? In 3 months? In a year? Never." The pastor stood up. "Eduardo, I'll make you an offer. Withdraw the police report and I'll pay you personally. Right now. Both months of salary you're owed. In cash." I looked at him. I saw fear in his eyes. He was scared. Scared of being exposed. Scared of losing everything. "And Joanna? And Mr. Antonio? Them too. I'll pay all 3. And Fabio? Will he be punished?" The pastor hesitated. "He'll be removed from his position as treasurer." "That's it?" "Yes." I stood silent, thinking. Part of me wanted to accept. I desperately needed that money. But another part of me knew that if I did, I'd be selling my dignity. I'd be agreeing that what they did was okay, that the powerful can do whatever they want as long as they pay for it later. "No." The pastor's eyes widened. "What do you mean, no?" "I'm not withdrawing the report, and I'm not taking your money, because this isn't about money. It's about justice, and you need to answer for what you did." The pastor turned red with anger. "Eduardo, you're making a mistake. A big mistake. Maybe, but at least I'll sleep in peace." I left that office with my heart pounding. I knew I had just signed my own sentence. They wouldn't forgive me for this, and I was right. The next day when I arrived at work, Mrs. Miriam handed me an envelope. "Eduardo, I'm sorry." I opened the envelope. It was a termination letter. Reason: dismissal for cause, due to breach of trust and disloyalty to the institution. I felt my legs tremble. They had fired me. After 10 years of work, after everything I had done for that church, they simply discarded me. I went home in shock. When I told Celia, she hugged me and cried with me. "Eduardo, what are we going to do now?" "I don't know, my love, but we'll find a way." That night, Laura came to me and asked, "Dad, why are you sad?" I looked at her and forced a smile. "I'm not sad, sweetheart. Just tired." "Dad, the teacher said we have to bring the money for the field trip tomorrow. Did you get it?" I felt my heart break. "No, sweetheart, I couldn't." She lowered her head. "It's okay, Dad. I don't really need to go." And she left the room. I stayed there, alone, with the feeling that I had failed. Failed as a father, failed as a provider, failed as a man. But then I remembered something. I still had the recording, I still had the proof, and I wasn't going to let them go unpunished, even if it cost everything. I spent the following days at home, unemployed, humiliated, not knowing what to do. Celia kept working at the hospital, but her salary alone barely covered the basic expenses. We were living in a tiny room at her mother's house, sharing a bathroom with 3 other people. Laura slept on a thin mattress on the floor. Every night I looked at that and felt such shame that I couldn't sleep. The police investigation was moving slowly. The officer had called me saying they needed more documents, more evidence, more time, always more time. Meanwhile, Pastor Renato and Fabio were still free, running the church as if nothing had happened. One day, I got a message on my phone. It was from an unknown number. "Eduardo, I'm a journalist from the Verdade Jorge news portal. I heard about your complaint against Monte Sinai Church. I'd like to talk with you. Can we meet?" I looked at that message and felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. If the police weren't doing anything, maybe the press could. Maybe public exposure would force the authorities to act. I replied yes. We set the meeting for the next day at a cafe near my home. When I got there, I met a woman in her 30s, short black hair, glasses, with a laptop in front of her. She introduced herself as Fernanda. "Eduardo, thank you for agreeing to talk with me. I know it must be hard for you to speak about this." "It is. But I want people to know what happened. Can you tell me everything from the beginning?" I told her. Everything, from the day my paycheck didn't come in, to discovering the conversation between the pastor and Fabio, to my dismissal for just cause. She took notes, recorded on her phone, asked questions. When I finished, she was silent for a few seconds. "Eduardo, this is extremely serious. Do you have proof?" "Yes. The recording of their conversation. Can you send it to me?" I took my phone and sent her the file. She put on her earphones and listened. When she was done, she looked at me with a serious expression. "This will make a big story. Are you ready for what might come?" "What do you mean?" "When this is published, there'll be repercussions. The church will try to defend itself. They'll attack you. They'll say you're lying, that you were fired for other reasons, that you're bitter. You need to be ready for that." "I am." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure, because I'm telling the truth, and the truth always wins." She smiled. "I hope so, Eduardo. I really hope so." 3 days later, the article was published. The headline read, "Evangelical Pastor Covers Up Nephew's Theft of Employees' Salaries." The report had everything: my interview, the recording, testimonies from Joanna and Mr. Antonio, photos of the church. It was complete, detailed, devastating. Within hours, it went viral. Thousands of shares, comments, outrage. People were furious. "Outrageous! Jail for them! Corrupt church! Justice!" My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Journalists asking for interviews, people offering support, friends I hadn't heard from in years sending messages, and also hate messages. Many. People calling me a traitor, a liar, an enemy of God. The next day, the church posted an official statement on social media. It said the accusations were false, that I had been fired for incompetence and disloyalty, and that I was spreading lies to defame the institution. It said they would sue the news outlet and me for slander and defamation. But the truth was already out, and people knew it. The following Sunday, when Pastor Renato took the pulpit, the church was packed. But it wasn't a normal crowd. There were reporters, curious people, people who wanted to see what he would say. He tried to start the service as usual, but he was interrupted. A man from the congregation stood up and shouted, "Pastor, is it true what they're saying? Did you cover up Fabio's theft?" The pastor turned pale. "Brother, that's a lie, a set-up against this church. But there's a recording. We heard it." The recording was taken out of context. I didn't cover anything up. I was trying to resolve the situation in the best way possible. "Resolve it? The employees went months without pay. How is that resolving it?" Other members started standing up too. Questions, shouts, chaos. The service turned into confusion. The pastor tried to calm things down, but he couldn't. People were angry. Some left. Others stayed, visibly upset. In the end, he couldn't preach. He simply stepped down from the pulpit and left. In the following days, things got worse for them. The police intensified the investigation. The public prosecutor's office opened an inquiry. The church began losing members, entire families leaving, transferring to other congregations. Offerings dropped drastically. The pastor tried to hold a clarification service, but few attended. I got a call from the public defender's office. They had accepted my case and would represent me both in the labor lawsuit and in the criminal case against the pastor and Fabio. For the first time in months, I felt that justice was on my side. A week later, Pastor Renato took a leave from his leadership role. He said he was going through a difficult time and needed to step away temporarily. Fabio was formally dismissed and had to return all the money he had embezzled. The church hired a new treasurer and carried out a full audit of the accounts, and I finally got paid. All the back pay plus compensation for wrongful dismissal. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough for us to start over. We rented a small apartment, but it was ours. Laura got her own room back. Celia cut back on extra hours at the hospital, and I started looking for a job. But what truly marked me wasn't the money. It was the day Pastor Renato called me. "Eduardo, I need to talk to you." About what? I want to apologize. I said nothing. I was wrong. I know I was wrong. I should have protected you. I should have done the right thing from the start. But I let fear and pride speak louder. And because of that, you and your family suffered. I'm sorry. His voice trembled. It sounded sincere. But I still felt the anger, the resentment, the pain from everything I'd been through. Pastor, I accept your apology, but that doesn't erase what happened. You destroyed my life. You destroyed my family's life. And all because of a thief nephew you wanted to protect. You chose blood over justice. And that's not something I'll forget so easily. I understand. I hope you do. I hung up the phone. A few days after that phone call, something happened that I didn't expect. Joanna called me, her voice trembling with nerves. Eduardo, you need to see what's happening at the church. What's going on? The members are gathering. They're demanding the pastor's permanent removal. There's going to be an extraordinary assembly tonight. Everyone will be there. You have to come. I'm not part of that church anymore, Joanna. But you started this. You exposed the truth. You need to be there to see the ending. I thought for a few seconds. She was right. I had started it, and I needed to see how it ended. That night, I went to the church. When I arrived, the parking lot was full. There were people I hadn't seen in years. Old members, new ones, curious onlookers, even a few journalists outside. I went in and sat at the back, trying not to draw attention. But soon, some people recognized me. Some looked away. Others came to shake my hand and thank me. Thank you for your courage, Eduardo. You did the right thing. We needed to know the truth. I felt a mix of relief and sadness. Relief because people were finally on my side. Sadness because it had taken so long for it to happen. The assembly began. Pastor Renato entered through the side door, accompanied by 2 board members. He looked different, thinner, with dark circles under his eyes, slumped shoulders. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in just a few weeks. He walked up to the pulpit, but he was no longer the confident, authoritative man he used to be. He was broken. Brothers and sisters, I know you're here tonight because you want answers, and I came to give those answers. The church went silent. I made a mistake, a very serious mistake. When I found out that my nephew Fabio had stolen the employees' salaries, I should have acted immediately. I should have reported it, corrected it, punished it. But I didn't. I tried to protect him. Because he's family. Because I thought I could fix it another way. And by doing that, I failed you. I failed the employees. I failed God. Some people began to cry. Others shook their heads in disbelief. I know an apology won't erase what happened. It won't give back the time that Eduardo, Joanna, and Mr. Antonio lost. It won't erase the pain, the humiliation, the suffering they endured. But I need to apologize, publicly, in front of all of you. He paused, swallowed hard, and continued. That's why I'm here tonight to announce that I'm resigning as senior pastor of this church. I no longer deserve to lead you. I broke the trust you placed in me, and that is unforgivable. A murmur spread through the church. Some people clapped. Others sat in silence, trying to process what they had just heard. The pastor stepped down from the pulpit. When he walked past me, our eyes met. I saw shame in his, and maybe a hint of genuine remorse. But I didn't feel pity. I felt only that justice had finally been done. After he left, the president of the board took the pulpit and announced that new leadership would be elected in the coming months, that a full financial audit would be conducted, and that measures would be put in place to ensure something like this would never happen again. At the end of the assembly, Joanna came to me. She was crying, but they were tears of relief. We did it, Eduardo. We did it. Yeah, we did. We left the church together. I looked back one last time. That place I had loved so much, where I had served for so many years, now looked different, smaller, more fragile. But at the same time, I knew something important had happened there. The truth had won. Justice had been done. And maybe, just maybe, the people who remained inside would now have a better church. A more honest church, a church that truly honored the name it carried. That night, I went home thinking about everything that had happened, The months of pain, struggle, and despair. How many times I'd wanted to give up. How many times I'd thought it wasn't worth it. When I got home, Celia and Laura were in the living room watching TV. Laura ran to me and hugged me. "Dad, Mom told me the pastor left the church. Is it true?" "It's true, sweetheart." "So that means we won?" I looked at her and smiled. "It means justice won." Celia came over and hugged me too. The three of us stood there, holding each other, a family that had been through the fire but had survived, together. That night, lying in bed, I finally slept in peace. For the first time in months, I didn't feel that weight in my chest. I didn't feel anger, bitterness, or despair. I felt relief and gratitude. Gratitude for having had the courage to fight, courage not to give up, courage to believe that the truth, no matter how painful, would always be worth it. A few days later, I got another call. It was from Fabio. "Eduardo, I know you don't want to talk to me, and I understand, but I need to apologize." I said nothing. "I ruined everything. I destroyed my life, my uncle's life, and yours too. I was selfish, cowardly, and criminal, and I'll carry that for the rest of my life. Why are you calling me, Fabio?" "Because I need you to know that I'm sorry, truly sorry. I returned all the money I took. I'm facing criminal charges, and I accept every consequence of what I did. But I needed to tell you this. I'm sorry." I took a deep breath. "Fabio, I don't know if I can forgive you now. Maybe someday, but not now. What you did to me and my family was cruel. You made us go hungry. You made us lose our dignity, and all for what? Debts, money? I know, and I have no excuse. No, you don't, but I hope you learn from it, that you become a better person. Because if not, all this suffering will have been for nothing." "I'll try. I promise." I hung up the phone. Weeks passed. I found a new job as a janitor in a commercial building. It wasn't the same as working at the church, but it paid well and I was treated with respect. Laura started smiling again. Celia began sleeping peacefully again, and I started to feel hope again. One Sunday, I woke up and thought about going to church. Not Monte Sinai, but another one. Celia looked at me surprised. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. I'm not going to let what happened destroy my faith. The church failed me, people failed me, but God didn't." We went to a small congregation near our house. It was simple, humble, without grandeur. The pastor was an elderly man, soft-spoken, who preached with sincerity. No one there knew me, no one knew my story, and that was liberating. When the service ended, the pastor came to talk to me. "First time here?" "Yes." "Welcome. What's your name?" "Eduardo." "Eduardo, if you need anything, we're here. This house is yours." I smiled, and for the first time in a long time, I truly felt that it was. 6 months had passed since the day Pastor Renato publicly resigned from his position. Monte Sinai Church was never the same again. Part of the congregation left, disillusioned by what had happened. Others stayed, determined to rebuild the institution from the ground up. A new pastor was elected, younger, with ideas of transparency and accountability. He implemented a monthly open audit for all members, where every cent the church received was documented and disclosed. Money would never again be a mystery in that place. Eduardo, meanwhile, had rebuilt his life far from that church. His job at the commercial building was going well. He was paid on time, respected by his colleagues and the management. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was honest. And for him, after everything he had gone through, honesty was worth more than any prestigious position. Celia also found a new job as an administrative assistant at a private clinic. The salary was better and the schedule more flexible. She managed to cut down her hours at the hospital and had more time at home. Laura, little by little, started smiling again. She was getting excellent grades at school and still dreamed of becoming a doctor. Eduardo saved every cent he could, hoping that one day he'd be able to pay for her college. Joanna, too, rebuilt her life. She found a job at a public school as a cafeteria worker. The salary was steady, with benefits guaranteed. Her son resumed proper therapy and was getting better. She and Eduardo met occasionally for coffee to talk about everything they had been through. They always ended their conversations with the same words: We survived, Mr. Antonio, the oldest of the 3 employees who had been wronged, decided to retire. He had both the age and years of service required. With the labor settlement he received from the church, he bought a small house on the outskirts of the city and began living peacefully, taking care of his grandchildren and tending a garden. When Eduardo visited him, he said, "I just wanted peace for my final years, and now I have it." As for Pastor Renato, he never led another church again. After resigning, he and his wife moved to another city, trying to start over far from the scandal. Some said he opened a small business. Others said he taught private theology classes. No one knew for sure. What was known was that he carried the weight of what he had done, and that weight would never fully go away. Fabio was criminally convicted for embezzlement. He was sentenced to 2 years on probation, along with the obligation to return all the stolen money with interest and adjustments. He never again found work in the administrative field. His name was tarnished. Every time someone searched his name online, the scandal appeared. He learned the hard way that choices have consequences, and that those consequences last forever. One day, Eduardo ran into him on the street. It was an unexpected, uncomfortable encounter. Fabio lowered his head and tried to walk away, but Eduardo called out to him, "Fabio!" He stopped, turned slowly. "Eduardo, you don't have to say anything. I just want you to know one thing. I forgive you." Fabio's eyes widened. "You forgive me?" "Yes, not because you deserve it, but because I don't want to carry hatred inside me anymore. I spent months feeling anger, resentment, bitterness, and it was destroying me from the inside. So I decided to forgive, not for you, for me." Fabio began to cry. "I don't deserve that." "No, you don't. But I'm not doing it because of deserving. I'm doing it because I need to move on. And to move on, I need to forgive." Eduardo turned and walked away. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. That chapter of his life was over. Months later, Eduardo received an unexpected invitation. It was from the new pastor of Monte Sinai Church. He was organizing a special reconciliation service and wanted Eduardo to participate, to share his story publicly so that the members could understand the importance of justice, transparency, and honesty in the church. Eduardo hesitated. He wasn't sure if he wanted to go back there. Too many painful memories, too much sorrow. But Celia encouraged him. "Go, Eduardo. People need to hear your story. They need to learn from what happened." So he went. When he walked into that church again, his chest tightened. Everything looked the same. The same pulpit, the same pews, the same scent. But at the same time, everything was different. There were new faces, new leadership, a new spirit in the air. The pastor called Eduardo to the pulpit. He walked up, looked at the congregation. There were about 100 people there. Some he recognized, others he didn't. He took a deep breath and began to speak. "My name is Eduardo, and for 10 years I was the janitor of this church. I loved this place. I took care of it as if it were my own home. But a few months ago, something happened that changed my life forever." He told everything. From the first unpaid month, to discovering the conversation between the pastor and Fabio, to the fight for justice, the firing, the humiliation, the despair, and finally, the victory. People listened in complete silence. Some cried. Others shook their heads in disbelief. When he finished, Eduardo said, "I'm not here to speak badly about the church. I'm not here to judge anyone. I'm here to say one thing. Leaders are human, and humans make mistakes. But when a leader makes a mistake and tries to hide it, he stops being a leader. He becomes a problem. And the church must have the courage to confront those problems, because if it doesn't, it becomes an accomplice." The people applauded. It was a long, emotional applause. Some stood up. Others came to embrace him afterward, apologizing for not believing him before. Eduardo accepted every hug, every apology, every word of support. At the end of that service, he walked out of the church with a different feeling. It was no longer anger, no longer bitterness. It was peace. The peace of someone who had fought and won. The peace of someone who had faced injustice and refused to bow down. The peace of someone who knew he had done the right thing even when everything seemed against him. That night, when Eduardo returned home after the reconciliation service, Laura was waiting at the door. She had grown a bit in the past few months, taller, more mature. Her eyes still sparkled with that kind of curiosity only a child has. "Dad, you went back there." "I did, sweetheart. How was it?" Eduardo knelt down in front of her and looked into her eyes. "It was freeing. You know when you carry a heavy burden for a long time and suddenly you can finally set it down? That's what it felt like." Laura hugged her father. "I knew you would make it, Dad. You're the bravest man I know." Eduardo felt his eyes well up. He held his daughter close and silently thanked God for giving him strength, for not letting him give up, for helping him keep fighting even when everything seemed lost. Celia appeared in the living room, wiping her hands on her apron. She had prepared dinner. The table was set, simple food but abundant: rice, beans, chicken, salad. For Eduardo, that meal was more than food. It was dignity. It was freedom. It was a new beginning. During dinner, he told them everything that had happened at the service. How hard it was to go back to that place. How liberating it was to share his story. How people had reacted. Celia listened quietly, sometimes smiling, sometimes with tears in her eyes. "You know what I admire most about you, Eduardo?" she asked at the end. "What?" "You never lost your faith. Even when people disappointed you, even when the church betrayed you, you never blamed God. You never stopped believing." Eduardo smiled. "That's because I learned to separate things. The church is made of people, and people fail. But God doesn't fail. As long as I keep that clear in my mind, I'll be fine." The months that followed were a time of rebuilding. Eduardo and Celia managed to save some money and buy a few new pieces of furniture for the apartment. Nothing fancy, but decent. Laura got a small desk for studying. Celia replaced her old wardrobe with a new one. Eduardo bought a second-hand couch, but it was comfortable. Life wasn't perfect, it never would be, but it was good, honest, dignified. And for someone who had spent so long in uncertainty, humiliation, and despair, that was more than enough. A year after the scandal, Eduardo received an unexpected message. It was from a television producer. They had heard about his story and wanted to feature it in a special report about abuse of power in religious institutions. They wanted him to participate. Eduardo hesitated, exposing his story again, this time to the whole country, was something he wasn't sure he wanted. But once again, Celia encouraged him. "Go, Eduardo. Think of how many people are going through what you went through, but are too afraid to speak out. How many are being deceived, robbed, humiliated, and stay silent because they think they're offending God. Your story could help them." So he went. The interview was recorded in a studio in São Paulo. Eduardo told everything once again. The journalist asked difficult questions, pushed on sensitive topics, but he answered each one with honesty. In the end, she asked, "Eduardo, if you could give one piece of advice to someone going through what you went through, what would it be?" He thought for a few seconds and replied, "I'd say, don't be afraid to fight for the truth. No matter how powerful the person hurting you is, no matter how many friends they have, no matter how many people doubt you. The truth always wins. It may take time, it may hurt, it may cost you dearly, but in the end the truth always wins, and when it does, you'll sleep in peace. And peace is something no money can buy." The report aired 3 weeks later. It had a huge impact. Eduardo received hundreds of messages from people who had gone through similar situations, people who identified with his pain, people who felt encouraged to report the abuses they were enduring. One of those messages came from a woman named Patricia. She said she had worked as a secretary in a church for 5 years without ever being formally registered. No labor rights, no paid leave, nothing. When she tried to question it, they threatened to fire her. Eduardo's story gave her the courage to seek justice. Months later, she messaged again. She had won her case and received all her rights. Eduardo saved that message, and all the others. They were proof that everything he had endured had not been in vain. He had planted seeds of justice, and now those seeds were beginning to grow. 2 years after the scandal, Monte Sinai Church was completely transformed. The new leadership had established a transparent accountability system. Every employee was formally registered with full benefits. The church's finances were audited monthly by an external company. Any member could request access to financial reports. The congregation was smaller now, but those who remained were committed to truth, justice, and integrity. The church was no longer that grand, showy place. It was humble but honest, and that was worth far more than any spectacle. Eduardo never went back to work there, but he visited occasionally. He would sit in the back, listen to the sermon, greet familiar faces, and always leave with a sense of peace. As for Laura, she kept moving forward. She passed her university entrance exams with a full scholarship at a federal university. She was going to fulfill her dream of becoming a doctor. When she got the acceptance letter, she hugged her father and said, "Thank you, Dad, for never giving up, for fighting, for teaching me that we should never bow down to injustice." Eduardo cried. He cried with pride, with joy, with relief. Everything he had gone through, everything he had fought for, everything he had suffered, had been worth it. Because his daughter was there, strong, determined, ready to conquer the world, and he had been part of that. Eduardo's story isn't just about a man who was robbed and betrayed. It's a story about courage, about integrity, about justice, about the importance of not staying silent in the face of abuse, even when everyone around you tries to silence the truth. It's about the difference between faith and blind obedience. Faith is trusting in God. Blind obedience is submitting to flawed men who use God's name to justify their wrongs. Eduardo learned that the hard way, but he learned, and he taught it to his daughter, to his wife, and to everyone who heard his story. Today, Eduardo still works as a janitor. He's still a simple man, but he's a free man, free from guilt for having stayed silent, free from the weight of having bowed down, free from the shame of having accepted injustice. And when he looks in the mirror, he sees a man who did the right thing, a man who fought, a man who won, and that to him is worth more than any position, any title, any recognition, because in the end, what matters isn't how much you have, it's how much integrity you keep when life's storms come, and Eduardo kept his integrity. And you? If you were in his place, would you have had the same courage? Would you have confronted the pastor? Would you have spoken out, even knowing you could lose everything? Or would you have stayed silent, letting injustice win? Comment below, justice or family protection? Was the pastor right to try to protect his nephew? Or was Eduardo right to expose everything? Share your opinion. And if you know someone who's been through something similar, share this story. Because the more people see that it's possible to fight and win, the more people will find the courage not to stay silent.